Hey everyone, welcome back to the MHP Show podcast. I'm your host, Derek Vickers. We have another episode for you here today, and we all know on the MHP Show, we talk about anything and everything that has to do with mobile home parks, operations, capital raising, all the aspects of the business. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I have a real treat for you here. I've got Mr. Ryan Smith. He is the founder of Elevation Capital Group. He's been in this business for a while. He's a big deal. And so, Ryan, welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thank you. Big, literally. I'm 6'8", so that's how big I am, I guess. That's the deal by which I'm big.
Yeah. It's funny. I was pulling up your website, Elevation Capital Group. And you know how when you search something on Google, the questions come up, like frequently asked questions? Like one of them said, how tall is Ryan Smith? And I was like, I swear to you.
That's funny. Apparently there's some freakish photos out there where I'm dwarfing somebody and somebody wanted to know that, I guess. I don't know. That's funny.
Well, I'm glad it came up because I was wondering that after we met. I'm like, dang, Ryan's pretty tall. So
yeah, that's funny. Well, I appreciate the time today.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show. So when I start the show, I'd love to ask people, what was your first entrepreneurial journey, Ryan?
Goodness gracious. At first, I guess one predated making money from it. But, I would say when I was a kid, I loved to code. I was fascinated by computers. And so I interestingly enough, I taught myself to code, and I started with HTML. In the way I did it back in those days was I learned you can save, and you can still do this today. So what I did is I saved the HTML like a web page. You right click, just says show source. And at those days in Windows environment, it would open in a Word file, and then I would save the Word file to my desktop as test.html. And then what you could do is open the test.html file in your local browser and then modify the language, hit refresh in the browser, and see what effect it had on the presentation. And that's actually how I learned the code, was just, modifying existing code on websites. And so I was fascinated by coding. You just could seem to solve all kinds of real world problems with software, which I loved. And so anyway, that's kind of the background there. And then I started as one of the first, entrepreneurial endeavors that I monetized was, my dad was in the real estate world, blue collar. We were blue collar, kind of fixing and flipping homes, single family homes. And I would help him with the underwriting and the analysis. And he wasn't that great at that. That was kind of my role within the family. So I endeavored to create a software program that he could use for himself. And selfishly, I thought that this could maybe get me out of his basement one day and allow me to leave the home by giving him a tool that substituted myself. But anyway, I built the software program, and it was initially called RealPoint Pro, later rebranded as IntelliPoint Pro. I had about 100. It ended up. So I built the software program. I coded it. It turned out to be like I think off memory more than 30,000 lines of code, and it allowed my dad to underwrite his own investments for himself from the comfort of his home. It was really simple. Made something complex simple, and so he told a friend I found a market, and ended up having about 140,000 people around the globe using my software to analyze their investments as a teenager, which was pretty surreal.
Wow. And so you taught yourself how to code. So if I looked at code, I'm going to my head's going to spin, and takes a different kind of person to like that kind of stuff.
I not really. Truthfully, you code now. I mean, honestly, you code now. Every underwriting you do, it's coding. It really is coding. It's you're structuring a process that can be duplicated, with the hope of a desired outcome. And it's underwriting a deal is not, you could kind of consider that coding to a degree. So you're not far from it. if you like to underwrite and you're analytical and you like to structure things and processes, then that's kind of coding.
Okay, I see your point there. I guess when I think of coding, my head doesn't go there, so my head starts to spin a little bit. So,
no, yeah, you got it. You could do it.
Yeah, for sure. So those, like, the skills that you had and you learned doing that in that first business, how did the skills that you developed there, I guess, what were those skills that helped you develop and scale your real estate business now?
Well, I think it's more than the skill. I think it's more of an attribute. Like, I was just a really curious person, and I like puzzles, and I liked to see. I mean, this is going to sound hokey and eye rolling, but I really do like to make things better. Hence the name Elevation. Like, in code was a really practical way for me to see a need, solve the problem directly myself. And at that time, when I was young, I would go into a business and I literally would see a problem that software could solve. I'd go home, write a software program, put it on a 3.5-inch disk, go into the business owner and hand them the disk and say, I think this will help you. Like, I didn't charge them for it. Like, it's just such an opportunity to be curious but curiosity, but to the point of actually, being able to execute on something, quantify the need, come up with the solution, structure that the solution, and then produce it. So anyway, I loved that part of it. But I would say the attribute is curiosity. I've always been curious. I remain curious. So I think that's persistent in our business. As I sit here today, a lot. I'm really busy for a very long time, such that our story probably to the point where I don't even want to tell my story anymore because it's just long. It's just a lot of hands and hands.
Hey, Ryan, your sound went out a little bit. It's sounding funky right now.
Sorry, the audio.
Yeah. I started to hear myself and then it muffled a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Good. Lucky for you.
Yeah. So you were talking about, I think the last thing before you kind of went out, you were just talking about, your story and curiosity, how that led you and helped you to where you are today. So
Yep.
I think that's really awesome. And that's a really fascinating story. I haven't talked to someone that was like, hey, I started doing coding and then, I got into the business where I am today. So that leads me to the next question. So you started investing in real estate at some point. So, enlighten us on that and then transition, how in the heck that you got in to mobile home parks or trailer parks, this weird little funky asset class.
Yeah. So it kind of goes back to my background. My family was blue collar. My dad, really we grew up very with limited resources. And so my dad really set out to try to make something more for himself. And he did that through real estate. So, and I'm grateful for him for having done that because on a lot of different levels, I grew up every weekend, like most of your listeners, and it's nothing novel. It's kind of the American way, which I love is, you work your tail off and you learn the hard lessons through the sweat of your brow, and that, produces character and, desire to work and all of those things. So that was my childhood. Every weekend we were at a different property, scraping, trenching. My job was to do all the stuff my dad didn't want to do. And I loved it. I loved working, loved it. And still to this day do. So anyway, point being is I had exposure to real estate. I had the software program that I had helped code later on. I later sold that company and had made a fair amount of money from that company. So I had some resources for myself. I had the software program. I had the awareness of real estate, and then I had an unbelievable business partner who's my bride, Jamie, who works down the hall here. And so she and I, went out and we started buying single family houses, and we bought about 30 or so single family houses in our early 20s. And just one at a time, goal, long-term ownership. We own still several of them. And we pretty quickly found it wasn't that scalable, not a bad business, but just not as scalable as we were looking for. And that's kind of what kind of brought us to that decision point of looking for something, hopefully better. And that's kind of where we found self-storage and mobile home parks.
Got it. And so what was it that made you, I remember when I think you were on Ryan Naris's podcast at some point. I had listened to that episode before, but you talked about meeting a guy that kind of shocked you and was like, man, told you were doing this all wrong or something to that degree. Tell me a little bit about that. Yeah.
So I'm like everybody, I'm so fortunate to have been mentored by so many people who didn't know they mentored me. I learned, I've met unbelievable people. I'm constantly learning. And so there was a gentleman I met through a mutual friend many years ago, probably 15 years, or maybe actually probably more than that, probably 17, 18 years ago. And at the time, I think he had 50,000 rental units that he owned and operated. And I had an invitation by a mutual friend to say, hey, would you want to meet this guy? And I said, this will tell you about kind of where I was at the time and my upbringing, but I didn't know there were people like that existed. Like just in the intro to this guy, I learned a ton. I didn't even know you could own 50,000 units. I thought there was a law against that somewhere. Like I had no idea. And so when the question was, do you want to meet this guy? I said, I will walk backwards from Florida to California if that's what it takes. And I, joking, not joking, I would have done it. So thankfully I didn't have to walk backwards, but I got to meet this gentleman. And we had lunch and in Newport Beach, California. And he asked me a ton of questions about, kind of just poking around to find out who we were and whether this was a complete waste of his time. And thankfully, he didn't determine it was. At the end of the meeting, he asked me a couple of questions. He's like, so, what is your goal with your business that you're building? And, Jamie and I think at the time, this is off recollection, but I think our goal was like, I don't know, 20, 30,000 a month of net cash. Like it was an income goal. And it might've been, if it wasn't 20, it was 30 or something like that. We were going through for a monthly income goal, whatever it was at the time. And, I didn't grow up coming from wealthy parents and deep pockets and wealthy friends and any of this. So for me, I'm in my, somewhat, we're in our early mid 20s, we had, we're on our way to, whatever it was, call it 20, 30,000 a month of net cash as a goal. And we think that's pretty hot stuff. Right. So, and then not for external consumption, but the point is we're like, we're going someplace, we're moving. And so he asked me this question. And I think I remember saying like 20, 30,000 a month. And his reply, I will never forget. He goes, well, that's nice if that's what you want. And he didn't say another word. And so I remember distinctly, I remember the internal dialogue that we all have. I remember thinking, it's like, okay, I'll bite, I'll ask the follow on, it seems like that was insufficient as a goal. So, so I asked him, I said, well, do you see anything wrong with that goal? And if so, how should I think about that? And then his reply was really formative and encouraging and gave me direction in a lot of ways. Just his reply, not his reply in 5 years of mentorship and a mastermind group. It was like just his reply. But his reply was, he's like, if I can encourage you to do anything, it's focus on wealth creation. He said, in short, it is impossible under our current tax structure. It is impossible to create wealth. Let me see here. It's impossible to create wealth through income. It's impossible to create wealth through purely cash flow. And so he said, focus on the wealth and then utilize the wealth to create all the cash you need. Through wealth, you can create cash flow, but through cash flow, you can't create wealth. And it was kind of, I like those kind of paradoxical puzzles. And ultimately, I've realized in my own life that it was a very true statement. He was dead right, and we made modifications to our plan and our path based on his feedback, and we're grateful he was right.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it's so interesting how Especially in today's society, I think lack of wealth for people comes from lack of knowledge. And so, like for me, for example, in the beginning, I thought a guy that was worth $100 million, a guy that's worth, $500 million, I thought he literally got a W-2 at the end of the year that said $100 million. I didn't have that. I didn't have the knowledge. And then I actually learned through mentors and various things like, hey, you need to focus on wealth. And I just think, unfortunately, in our society and school system, they don't necessarily teach us those skills or the right mentality to have. And, because I had a cash goal just like you did.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, and you see even in the, marketing floating around in the, the interwebs today where it's like, quit your job, be a, passive, full-time passive investor, passive LP. And it's, it's kind of ironic to me in a way, because if you've worked, and there's, grant me latitude in this, so this may come off overly harsh, and I don't intend it to be this way or exhaustively true, but to a certain degree, if you've worked in a profession for 10, 20, 30 years chasing income, don't have what you need, why would you bite that bait that says we're going to give you more of what you've chased but never found? And for some reason over here, it's going to work, but where you've seen it, it hasn't worked. Like you're just jumping from a lily pad that hasn't supported you to a lily pad that will similarly not support you. I don't get it. Right. It's puzzling to me.
Yeah.
But it tickles the ears, right? I mean, it's make the same you're making now and do no work. It's, it definitely tickles the ears, but it's kind of ironic.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, there's a lot of stuff out there floating around, like no work. And look, I fell into that, like, the passive thing of mobile home parks. Like, but you and I both know it's far from passive, ever. And it's so funny if you go on some of the websites, like Corexy or something. I think I saw one on there the other week. The ad was mailbox money investment. Like essentially, you don't have to do anything, and it was a park-owned mobile home park.
Yeah,
far from that.
Yeah,
far from that.
Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, I wanted to mention something on that, and then circling back, you found mobile home parks. What was that first mobile home park deal that you got in? Tell me a little bit about that. And did that really open your eyes to how lucrative this asset class could be?
Yeah. And so, happy to do it. So we, and I actually I have to go back and remember which one was the first one, because we did a number at the same time. But but in short, when Jamie and I were looking to kind of transition out of single family residential, we basically spent a long weekend and we were trying to find where we wanted to go, what path to pursue. And so ultimately we came up with kind of four key things that we wanted. And this was in our early mid 20s, but they're still true today, but they were, they were simple. We wanted a business that produced, cash flow. We wanted the cash flow to grow as predictably as possible. Another way of saying that is low correlation or low beta. Not this recession-proof kind of stuff. Like, it may go through recessions, it may ebb and flow, but generally we wanted cash flow to go up and to the right. We wanted capital appreciation, which kind of speaks to NOI growth. We wanted a good pathway to NOI growth, and we wanted tax benefits to the extent possible. So those were kind of the four things. So we spent a long weekend. We analyzed all the different asset classes we could think of for those four things and ranked them. And mobile home parks and self-storage came on top. And so that was kind of, we were really surprised about mobile home parks. And that's actually where we chose to start, because it seemed, we had talked about this before. We were seeing properties at that point in time with cap rates, in the high teens, low 20s. And not stabilized cap. I'm talking like in place cap rates. And for what it's worth, I don't think I've ever really mentioned that widely because nobody believed that, but that's where it was back in those days. Like, you were mid-teens all day long. And so anyway, we went out and we said, okay, this looks really good. We're going to have to buy a couple. just kind of prove it out, see if our underwriting's right. And so we went out, and believe off of memory, the first couple we bought were in Middle Tennessee, just kind of a little bit west of Nashville. And the deals were all off market, mom and pop. Jamie and I cold calling. My wife and I, my husband and I were, in the mobile home park business. We found your mobile home park. It looks beautiful. This is our first purchase. We'd love the opportunity to buy your park, and just building rapport with kind of thing. And so we bought a couple in Tennessee. We bought one in Alabama. We bought a couple in Kentucky. We bought some in Texas. And so after the first couple, I guess just a quick tangent, we found we had a lot of friends of ours who were stay-at-home moms. And I've got 4 kids, you've got 2. So, I know a lot of stay-at-home moms that typically with very young babies, they kind of want to do something, kind of intellectually stimulating, like they
Sure.
but obviously they don't have all the time in the world, and there's lots of distraction. So we kind of built this kind of informal army of stay-at-home moms that were dialed for us. And, when they could do it any time of day, we created territories and gave lists of all the mobile home parks in this state and this state. And they would just war dial every day. And then to the extent that they found a property, we would compensate them in various ways, but it was super fun. So that was the early days. It was kind of this informal army of stay-at-home moms.
Wow. And
We're dialing mobile home parks.
I could see how that would work, because some of these older guys you talk to, they would probably love to talk to a lady on the phone for an extended period of time.
100% positive. Yep. They could say the same script that I could say the same script. I would be less successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm glad you shared that, because that's a great idea, even to use today.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's one funny story, one real quick funny story that along those lines. There was one of the stay-at-home moms who I liked a lot. She was really sweet, good friend of mine. Her husband was not supportive of her doing anything entrepreneurial, and so, I was all about celebrating her success and causing him some heartburn, in the hopes that it would take him up in a good way, right? Not picking on him, but and so she found this property, and I think, we normally would have compensated her a couple $1,000s for her time spent calling on the property. But Jamie and I decided to bonus her, just spot bonus out of our pocket, $30,000. And so I remember going to Bank of America, being surprised that I had to order that much cash in advance. They didn't have it there. So I went and picked up $30,000 cash. And then we took her and her husband, she lives in Miami, Florida. We actually were down there for something else, and we took them out to Joe's Stone Crabs, which is a nice restaurant down there. We took them out to a nice restaurant, and at the end, I said, at the end of the dinner, I said, Danielle, you did such a great job. We're grateful for you. We want to celebrate your, what you did here, and we've got a big future and a lot we're going to go do, but we wanted to give you this, and we put it was like in a platter, with the top, and she opened it, and there was $30,000 cash, like crisscrossed on the platter, and he about had a heart attack. It was super, super fun. So there's fun little stories that have come along the way, but it's a fun business.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that story, and I've always gotten a lot of enjoyment out of doing stuff like that for staff and employees, especially for people that work hard. They're a 9-to-5, they're not entrepreneurial, but they do work hard, and rewarding them, I think, is it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling, and in that case, it would have been an extra good feeling.
Agreed, and I think to that, but to your point a second ago, it's like the way I think of it is we're entrepreneurial. So while they may not be without Jamie and I, we collectively are, and over time they will be because we are,
Right.
So that's kind of like, as I frame our, like how we think about our company and our culture, we are entrepreneurial. And then at the same time, we have all these little principles, like we all take out the trash, myself included. Like I pick up trash, I take out weed. So, but that's kind of the fun thing about the business is it's like, we have folks that work with us down the hall that I'm crazy about, and they may not be the type to go out and form a business, solve a need, but collectively we are doing exactly that.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. And we'd never be able to build businesses without, great people that are willing to come in and,
Yes.
and do the work. And so I've always, valued great employees, and I love doing great things for them because they deserve it 100%.
Agreed.
So, Elevation Capital. So you guys, started that. You just talked about you bought those first few parks. So, how much assets under management do you guys have now?
It's a hard one to, I think, and the reason it's hard is, valuations are changing. It seems like by the day. So, according to who and what's the basis, and I don't know what I do know is we've purchased over $750 million in property in our history, and so we've done a lot of volume. We have a big portfolio across mobile home parks and storage facilities in about 20 states, and we're to a degree we're just kind of getting started. That doesn't mean necessarily in quantity. Quality is a lot more important to me than quantity. So that doesn't mean we're trying to get to 2 billion or a billion. We just want to do the next deal as good as we can. And if there's no good deals for 5 years, we'll do nothing for 5 years. But I think there will be some deals that come up.
Yeah, for sure. And when you say quality, are you talking about just more quality? Great locations.
Yep.
Got it.
Well, so quality all the way around, and so quality, like 360 quality for me is it's the location of the asset, it's the kind of the makeup and composition of the asset, like how if it's storage, is it Class A, is it institutional quality, or is it on the mobile home park side, is it a 5-star, or is it a 0-star? Where is it on the location? Where's the quality spectrum of the asset? The quality of the capital, the LP capital, is it short duration capital where they were promised the moon and are largely impatient? Is it long-term capital? So quality to me would be long-term patient capital. And then debt, obviously quality on kind of the debt side is, to the extent you have debt. If you have no debt, that's quality because, you have virtually no risk right now in these kind of times. So you want to have, ideally low to no debt over time. And then to the extent that you have debt, who are your lenders? Is it agency on the mobile home park side? Is it CMBS, which we try to steer really clear of? Is it balance sheet? Is it, what kind of, who's the lender? And lender, the type of lender and the lender itself actually matter as well. So all of that, if you had long-term equity capital, no debt on a property really well located of high quality, I take those all day long. And so, like when I look out in the market now, I'm looking at, 4-cap assets still that are of that quality. So how do you make sense of an asset like that? I guess if you're looking at it from a 10 or 20 year perspective, it makes it a little bit different, but curious to how you would look at a deal like that. Well, I think it's the same way. I think we see it the same way. First, we're not all that acquisitive right now, and we haven't been lately because there's just not a lot we see that we're like, man, I got to have that,
Yeah.
We really haven't done a ton in the last couple of years. It's been more sleepy, but we're starting to see things that are interesting now. We're starting to, and I think next year that'll continue. So it's not to say we wouldn't be buying most likely. I would say to the extent, let me answer it this way, to the extent that we bought something, let's say 4 or 5 cap today, there'd have to be, some kind of value added opportunity where the in place cap rate, or the stabilized cap rate, would be, maybe it would stabilize to a 7-8 in a short amount of time, or high. Obviously, the more the merrier. But anyway, there'd have to be some kind of way to add value.
Yeah, for sure. Because some of these deals that I see out here, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to make money in year one. Probably not going to make any in year 2. Year 3 gets a little better. 4 or 5, gets better from there. And, if it's a well-located deal, I think, as you talked about earlier, the appreciation factor, you buy in Orlando, you buy in Tampa, around where we are, like, I don't think you can go wrong if you're willing to stick it out for those first few years. And I've just been battling with this in my mind, like, okay, it's probably overpriced for now. Should I buy that? Like, I go through this every day. And it's frustrating.
Well, and it's like, but on the flip side of that, if something was underpriced or significantly underpriced today, wouldn't that cause you all kinds of concern? Like on the flip side, if you had something significantly underpriced, you're thinking, what in the world am I missing? Right?
Yeah, like absolutely.
I guess to the listener who's like, well, I don't want to buy overpriced stuff. I want to buy underpriced. You got to, there's a point where it becomes increasingly concerning. There aren't that many stupid sellers out there that are willing to sell $1 for 50 cents. If they're willing to sell $1 for 50 cents, there might be a reason, and you may not like it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
No, you're good.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think, there's a lot, people learn from certain, courses and things. You have to buy a 15 cap. And if you find that today, you're right. And I'll have people bring me deals all the time. And if they bring me a deal like that, the first thing, I had a guy call me 2 weeks ago. I'm like, what's wrong with this thing? Because it was like, a high cap rate deal. And I'm like, what is wrong with this thing? Come to find out, the septic shot. And I'm sure you're aware of it. We're dealing with a city sewer tie-in now. And like 3 years ago, it would have been $500,000. Now it's $1 million to do it.
Yeah. Crazy.
And it could kill you.
Right. And that's where I go back to quality, like for where we are now going forward, like kind of where we've come from and where we are, it's like public utilities. That's quality for us. That's on the mobile home park, like, because it's just the risk of what could go wrong, or on the flip side, if this feeds back to the original lens we started with and the story you asked me about with regards to the advice that gentleman gave me to focus on wealth and that whole component. Starting with that really is helpful because it informs you into how you operate. Because there's a lot of forks in the road. Like, for example, if I were to ask, one of your listeners, would you prefer a long-term durable 6 cap asset or a 15 cap asset? Well, the irony is what you do, and the reason I asked the question that way, you'd probably want to buy the 15 but sell the 6. Right. If it's long-term durable on each, you'd want the 6 as long as it's long-term durable. But what most people want is they want the present cash flow of the 15, but they want the capital upside of the 6. But the 15 is probably never going to be the 6. So now you're actually, quite honestly, you're choosing between cash flow or capital appreciation, i.e. wealth. And you're actually, there's your choice. And most people will go the 15 all day long and find themselves having a lot of more cash flow, which is great. But they're taking a lot more risk in generating that cash flow, which is why they won't have the reward on the back end, which is the wealth creation component. And so that's why I say, and then the second part of it, because you kind of referenced it in your point, which is great, that people will go on and they'll find a course somewhere. But what I find interesting, and I'm not casting an opinion on this, but it's a question somebody should ask that I think is reasonable, which is, what is the framework of the person offering the course? By what lens do they view the world through? And is that a lens that I want to see the world through? And in most cases, if you don't have a lens and you don't know the difference between the lenses, then any lens will do. But you may find later that you conformed in the absence of a lens for yourself. You accepted a lens that you might find later you didn't want. So really be careful who you're listening to. And that doesn't mean charlatan. Like, I'm not saying good person, bad person.
Right.
They could all be good people, but you have to understand how they see the world, because they may be driving their boat to a destination you don't want to visit. So don't get on the boat.
Yeah, true. And I think, I learned that the hard way when I first started, because I had, learned to only look for a certain kind of deal. But like the deals that I found were that, we, created a lot of value in, were deals that were not like anybody in the industry would have said, Derek, do not buy this type of deal. Do not.
Yeah.
Park-owned homes, private utilities, blah, blah, blah. But that's where the opportunity was for me when I jumped in, because I think there was a lot of people avoiding that. And look, rightfully so, because it's a lot of work. And we still have various issues at some of these parks. But, had I not done, went against the grain a little bit, wouldn't have been able to create a lot of value in these assets.
Yeah, for sure. As long as you're conscious and knowing why you're doing what you're doing, and understanding the destination. That, I guess I'm just big on, like, a lot of times people accept other people's destinations as their own, not knowing kind of what that destination looks like. And it's almost like, I dislike mine so much, I'll take anybody's. And that is until you get the next person and realize, well, that's not true either. Like, I don't like theirs either, So anyway, I thought I'd point that out, because there's so much noise in the marketplace on so many levels. It's pretty easy to just go with the flow and, jump in the wrong boat.
Yeah, for sure. But I will say, 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, when I first started, it is 3 years ago now, when I first started buying stuff, I was like, anything to multiply capital, I'll do the work. I don't care how hairy it is, I can do it. Right.
Right.
And now I'm a little bit more picky, like you, I'm looking for, public utilities, because, we've owned everything from treatment plants to septics. And I mean, it's just, oh God, yeah. And so it's like, do you want to deal with that headache again? And, sometimes my answer is no. Deals got to be really good. But then again, to your point, you got to wonder when the deal's that good.
Right. And then is the risk worth taking? Because it's, you'll underwrite it and you'll say, well, I think it'll turn out right. I mean, we hope it does, but there are conditions where, private utilities can be Pandora's box. It's a risk, and there's a reason why you're getting paid what you're getting. The higher cash flow deals are generally, you're getting paid for risk you're taking, right? Or work you're having to put in to correct the problems, which is kind of risk to a degree. So it's kind of, I mean, generally speaking, most people 10 to 15 years in aren't doing what they started doing day one. Like, I think that's a pretty true statement. And you're the same way. I'm the same way. And to that end, I'll probably be hopefully better 10 years from now, and be able to provide more content to your listeners far more than I knew today. That's the goal.
Yeah. The last guy I had on the podcast, he said the same thing. He's like, yeah, I don't do value add anymore. I'm trying to think of the word he used for value add stuff, but soul breaking. I think that's what he said. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's interesting. That's probably about right to a degree.
Yeah. No, and we do value add for sure, but the soul, soul breaking. I like that. But we're pretty narrow on the risks we take in order to create the value. And, part of that is how much capital, time and human labor goes into creating the outcome. So as much as it can be OpEx and not CapEx intensive, then that would be great. But, anyway, everything we buy is value add to a degree.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and switching up here a little bit. So I know, like, when I started in the business in 2020, it was starting to get relatively consolidated. There was still a decent amount of mom and pops out there. Now, I mean, it's consolidated even more. And so I'm just, would love to hear, what you think the future outlook of, the mobile home park business is in the next, 5 or 10 years, and where the opportunity is going to be.
I think it's a great industry, and it's still largely, it's still largely mom and pop by volume, and especially when compared. Self-storage is still mom and pop, and it's a lot more consolidated than mobile home parks is. I think as a and then the other comment, I guess, is I think you and I have talked about kind of offline before, a lot of the consolidating quote unquote entities weren't really institutional. So it's not like, it's kind of like, in a weird way, it's like a mom and pop syndication consolidating mom and pop properties. So it's still kind of mom and pop,
Sure.
So that those opportunities may cycle, come back to market in some ways, not in all cases, but I still think there's a ton of opportunity. I think, as a general statement, as things consolidate, there's a little bit less cash flow in the short run and a little bit more capital appreciation in the long run. That's kind of, it's one. And so that's kind of up our alley, and what we want anyway, because we're more about wealth. It'll be more wealth creation. It's more problematic for the pure cash flow people, because it's harder and harder to pencil, or for it to pencil on a pure cash on cash return, they're going to have to take more risk and go more rural or more infill or more private utility. You're just going to have to take more and more risk to get it. But I think there's a ton of opportunity. I think the biggest risk to the space is likely regulation. And that has been that way for the last 2 decades since I've been in the space, but I think it's accelerating. I think that's the bigger concern. It's just over-regulation. We all want to be compliant and do the right thing and treat people with respect, and we're all that. I think we're all that way, but it's the over-regulation that's probably the biggest risk.
Sure. Where do you see, as far as over-regulation goes, what do you like? What policy could come in that could really shake things up? I know, like, probably national rent control if they ever did something crazy like that. Is there anything else that you foresee that could happen?
There's all kinds of things that policymakers can dream up. I hope they don't, I really hope they lean into the positive effects of policy and what they can do to actually solve the problem, rather than being more oriented towards hand slapping and harming or handicapping, folks with a profit motive, and ensure there are people who need to be reprimanded by doing things that they ought not be doing. But I think there's such an opportunity to lean in and actually fix the problem, because you can hand slap all day long. That doesn't create new supply. That doesn't help affordability. You're not, it's more of a pandering position to constituents than actually helping, good, hardworking people on Main Street, find a place that they can live affordably for the benefit of their future and their kids. And, which I really think there's a lot of opportunity out there to do that. So that's my hope. My hope is that they lean into the positive kind of aspect of policymaking, and then also deal with, the people who are doing what they shouldn't be doing. But anyway, I don't know. I'm hopeful in that regard, but, we'll see.
Yeah. I'm hopeful as well, but over the last 3 years, I've seen some crazy stuff.
For sure.
And I just never know I cannot predict what these crazies are going to do next.
No, I think, I don't, who knows? I think, I don't think crazy has run its course on either side. I think if I could, I would buy calls on crazy, and yes. I'd probably make a lot of money.
Yes, you would.
Crazy.
You would.
I wish there was a crazy index I could trade. And I know somebody, one of the listeners, is going to come up with some ticker or symbol and say there is. It's called the Vickers, or something. Anyway.
Yeah, you never know these days. And so, like, do you ever foresee, because I look at past, in the last 100 years, people always thought that we were going to be riding horses around. People thought that, that stuff, right? There's technology breakthroughs and things and industry disruptors. And when we look at the fundamentals of the mobile home park asset class, you talk to most people in the industry, they're like, oh, this asset is forever, it's never going to go away. Like, do you see anything that could come in and disrupt the industry? Because when there's a lot of people leaning one way, I always like to tend to proceed with caution a little bit. Do you think there could be some industry disruptor? And if so, what do you think that could possibly be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'm sure there's something that somebody will come up with somewhere. But the unique aspect of specifically manufactured housing is it gives the opportunity of home ownership in the home without the requirement of purchasing the land. And the land is the component that makes housing unaffordable in most cases. It's the land, not necessarily the structure. So the unique aspect of manufactured housing is it removes the expensive part, and that is the way it provides. So it's not providing necessarily affordability in innovative components, or materials, or any of those things. Now, so that's going to be hard to disrupt, and I think land will continue. They're not making it's all the cliche common things. They're not making more of it. There's scarcity. There's more and more people coming. So I don't know. I mean, I'm curious on how technology will play a role. I think there are possible interesting wrinkles with augmented reality and virtual reality to create the feeling of space and the feeling of room when there isn't, and that could drive affordability in the future. But who knows? It'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. And I had someone, mention something about 3D printed houses, but then I watched a video on that, and the guy was like, "Yeah, this house costs $400,000," and I'm like, "What's the difference?"
Right. And I actually know that I know the guy out of Austin. We're in a business group together. So I know that guy well. It's unbelievable what they're doing. And I have three 3D printers at home. So I'm a big 3D printed guy. But I love the concept. It's innovative, it's great, and it holds promise. But to your point, it's not a material cost issue. It's not, you can reduce material costs by 30%, and you're not addressing the part that makes it unaffordable. You're almost avoiding the problem. The problem is the land cost. And that's what mobile home parks do so well. Now, maybe in the future, there's new innovations to mobile home parks where you can go multi-story mobile home parks, which that's been one of the problems, is it's not effective for generating tax revenue. It's not highest and best use for tax revenue, which is why a lot of municipalities are reticent to allow more, because it's just, you got one use for that land, and that's not the best for producing tax. So if you can go vertical or subterranean, who knows? I do think there's going to be some neat things in the future. At least I hope so. But there's nothing lingering that I can see that's like, something that's going to take the low income housing market by storm, and at such a scale that it disrupts mobile home parks. I mean, I guess for the benefit of most Americans struggling to live today, I hope that happens. Like, truly hope that happens. But I don't see it.
Yeah. I don't really see it either. And I don't know, someone sent me this one time. It's a movie, but I forget what the movie's called, but can't think of what it's called. But anyways, it's a movie where augmented reality and virtual reality is kind of taken over. And the people, they wear these sets, but they live in mobile homes that are stacked on top of each other. I don't know if you've seen that or heard.
I think it's Ready Player One.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I think technology will help, maybe, but we're, what I think could possibly happen, we're a long way away from that being, practical reality. So, who knows? But, I don't think tiny homes is it. I don't think, the kind of the RV kind of park model. I'm not convinced that that's necessarily it. I really think, I think Clayton and a lot of the home builders build such a quality product and really, really affordable. I don't know how, anyway, maybe there will be some innovations there in material cost, but in construction process, but I don't, anyway, it's going to be interesting. But yeah, the demand, as you know, is so significant. It's I think the latest poll I saw, it's 400% of current supply is existing demand.
Wow.
So it's like, even if there was a new product type and it proliferated 1-to-1 with mobile home parks, we're still not meeting demand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's crazy. And like, so we, a few months ago, we had a house come available in, the Central Florida area here, put an ad on Facebook Marketplace. We'd get 300 responses within 48 hours. Just insane.
Crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. And I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. And I've been in this business now for 20 or more years. And that has been one of the few, if only constants, is affordability has been a crisis since the day I got in. And that was part of the thesis, is I thought there was going to be a just huge demand set against existing supply for a long time. And it's far worse today than when I got into the business. Some would say for the business lens, it's far better, but I'll stick to it's far worse, because it's people are struggling.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And do you ever think like the affordability aspect of like, 2-bedroom apartment rent, and then you're going into mobile home park lot rent, like, do you ever think that reaches a point where there's like a breaking point where it's like, okay, that's unaffordable now, but it's always going to be cheaper than everything else?
Yeah, and that's why we like mobile home parks from kind of an economic model and thesis, is it's the cheapest game in town, and arguably, and I would argue that it's a better quality product or better experience, or can be, than a significantly more expensive product type, which is apartments. So I think it's, for most people, it's actually a much better option and much cheaper. And it's the lowest ladder on the rung, so I'm not an intermediary in terms of what we call as the stratification of a marketplace. When you look at the strata, I'm the lowest strata. So I'm not, it's going to really be hard to disintermediate me, because I'm not intermediating anybody. I am principal. I am at the end, right? Yeah. So, in some cases, as you've seen in Florida and otherwise, we're oftentimes $1,000 a month cheaper, on a lot rent basis than an apartment would be for a similar sized home, and so, and there's some ebb and flow there. So, as apartments start to roll over in some markets today, they're starting to come down. That's where, mobile home parks have such a large margin of safety that other product types have to come down really significant before there's really true direct competition on pricing. And then we might have to follow and go down. And actually, I really haven't seen that in the last 20 years in the markets we've been in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, in all the data that I look at, and I just, it's still the fundamentals of this asset class they're awesome and they still work. And I foresee that working in the future as well. So Ryan, anything that you want to leave our listeners with before we close out here? Any words of wisdom after all the golden nuggets that you've already dropped?
No, I would just say, if you're a long-term, value and oriented investor, I think mobile home parks are a great asset class. I think they have tremendous merit. I don't think you'll regret over the long run investing capital in this space. There's a ton of risk to consider along the spectrum of time, but that's true of anything we put our money into. So, but I think mobile home parks have a tremendous amount of merit. And certainly at any point, if anybody has questions, or somebody has a one-off question or a what if, happy to help and answer and be a sounding board. But no, I think you've done a great job.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I do have one more question that I meant to ask you earlier. So you've bought, call it $1 billion worth of real estate. Like, what do you think what are the traits, or what do you think if somebody has those aspirations to do that? Like, what are the traits and skills that you've adopted that have allowed you to do that?
So it would be interesting and unique because I didn't have that desire, but here Jamie and I, when we started our business, we pretty much said, it'd be great if we could one day own $50 million in real estate, in total. And that was kind of loose for me because this is going to be provocative. I'm not a huge goal setter, because oftentimes you short sheet your bed, and so I'm just, the parts I can control are where I put my effort, how hard I work in a direction, and then the numbers take care of themselves. So I would say, forget about the billion, the 500,000, the 100, forget about the numbers, focus on doing it right with excellence. Whatever it is, something well done is much better than something poorly done in volume,
Yeah.
So kind of quality over quantity. Do focus on the disciplines, on the details, do those well, and build as prudent as over time. And you may find yourself with $10 million of assets one day and just killing it. You may find yourself with $1 billion one day and killing it. But I wouldn't, I wouldn't be induced to action by big numbers. Focus on the details, and then along the spectrum of activity, it's people first. That's been a big thing for Jamie and I. We really like people. We care about people. We try to prioritize people, be fair to people. And certainly there will be conflicts that'll rise and difference of opinion. But work hard, keep your head down, take care of people. And I think in the long run, the numbers will be what they're going to be, but they should be good if you can take care of those things.
Yeah, that's awesome, Ryan. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the value that you've given us today. I mean, it's been a great episode, and we appreciate having you on and coming on.
You bet, man. It's good. Always good spending time with you. So anytime.
Yeah, for sure. Well, everyone, thank you all for tuning in to the MHP Show. Please like and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube. Shoot us a comment if you like the show. That would help out a lot. We would appreciate it. And we will see you all next week. Peace.